with Citizens Oversight, and we're here today to talk about a ruling that we got from the court regarding our court case against Michael Vu, the Registrar of Voters in San Diego. First I'm going to cover the details about that case, and then we're going to go into an overview about what we're going to do next and how to implement the results of this case pretty much everywhere in the country that we can. The case itself was about the audit that is supposed to be conducted after or during the time when they're counting all the ballots of the election. And they call it a 1% manual tally. In general, it's an audit. Not all states do it 1%. And what this audit is supposed to be, like most audits, it's supposed to be a random selection of these 1% of the election, of the precincts or batches of ballots. And then they manually or count those and check that the computer result matches what the ballots actually have on them, and check out any variances that there might be. For the last few years, Citizens Oversight has been pursuing a protocol or methodology for providing oversight to the Registrar of Voters that we call the snapshot protocol. And in this protocol, or this method, what we do is we look very, very carefully at what the registrar is doing during the audit. And this is what really prompted us to understand the fact that this registrar and many of the registrars in the state of California are not including a large percentage of the ballots in their audit. And that was basically the reason for the case. It turns out that there's really 4 classes of ballots that come in. The ones that are executed and cast at the polling place, the physical places you might go in and yourself and cast your ballot in person. Those are called polls ballots. There's the vote by mail ballots that were cast fairly early in the election. You can send them in early, and they start counting them 10 days in advance of the actual election day. And a lot of those are processed by election day. In fact, those are the results that you first see at 8 o'clock. And then there's the later arrival vote by mails, and then finally the provisionals. And those 2 sets of ballots were being excluded by this registrar to the tune of 285,000 ballots. About 37% of the ballots being counted were being left out of the audit. It'd be kind of like the IRS saying, oh, we're going to audit you, but by the way, we're going to leave out the first part of the year. Guess where you're going to hide all of your bad stuff? In the first part of the year. Then if they also say, well, we're going to only sample a few places, but we're going to tell you in advance what they are, then there's no surprise at all. I guarantee that you're going to make it through the audit. A lot of the counties are doing it that way. They're actually picking the 1% in advance. This auditor here, this registrar is not quite that bad, but it's something we're pursuing. So we filed this case as soon as we found out that they weren't including these in the audit during the month after the election. We tried to get the registrar not to certify at all. We wanted him to not certify the election unless he followed the law, because the law states all ballots cast would be included in the audit. He's not following the law. What we're worried about, of course, is that there could be massive election fraud in those portions of the ballot count that are not being audited. If they know which areas they are, they might fix those areas and get the election to come out any way they want. So basically, there was 2 parts of this case. One was to say, stop, put the brakes on, do not certify unless you do it correctly. And the other part was, we don't want this ever to be done this way, in the future. Unfortunately, the judge was unable to stop them in their tracks because it was taking too long. But he did say in the ruling that they would have stopped them had we had enough time, because they said that we were likely to prevail in our case. The second part, it has to do with the future, and if they are going to do this in the future. Basically, in this ruling, they said a few things that are important. Number one, it it said, quote, plaintiffs provide evidence, we're the plaintiffs, that the defendants are not complying with the elections code by failing to include all ballots cast in 1% of the precincts chosen at random. Specifically, plaintiffs, that's us, demonstrate that the defendants are in violation of the statute by 1, not including any provisional ballots in the audit, and 2, not including all vote by mail ballots. So he's agreeing with us that we provided enough evidence to show that this registrar of voters is in violation of the law. Exactly what we asserted halfway through the election process, and we asked him very clearly, do what you're supposed to do. And he said, no, courteously or with respect. That helps. The other thing that we have here is they said, in reviewing the legislative intent and explicit text of the law, there is a reasonable probability that the plaintiffs will prevail. This is great. So basically they're saying that we won, or we will win when we continue our case. So the county is on notice that we're gonna be able to do this. Now they threw out their various rationale for not doing it. One of them said it was going to take too long, too many man hours. And the other one was it's prudent not to do it. Prudent not to do the whole thing. Well, both of those are just, and the other one was many other counties are also violating the law. And that was funny. Of course, the judge just cast those out without much of any discussion. Here's the most important thing. He said, the San Diego County Registrar of Voters has a legal obligation to comply with Section 15360. It is imperative that auditing requirements are followed completely in order to ensure the continued public confidence in election results. The San Diego County Registrar of Voters is obligated to allocate its resources appropriately in order to comply with the law. If defendants are unable to do so, that's the county, they must seek redress with the legislative or executive branches of government, not the court. Basically, it was embarrassing watching this county go into this court and try to say that it was okay for them to violate this law. You know, this year with all of the issues with the elections, and you've got this happening. You've got a registrar of voters and pretty much all the registrar of voters in the state of California cutting corners and not doing everything that they're supposed to do to ensure that our elections are done correctly. So that's pretty much what he said, and I'd like to introduce now